When a young woman with supernatural visions foresees deadly tragedies in her village, her warnings are dismissed as witchcraft, setting off a chain of events that could destroy her family and community. But burdened by a gift she never asked for, a gift that made her an outcast in her own home. For in Obodo, the truth was often seen as a curse, and silence was safer than sight. In the heart of Obodo lived a girl who saw too much. Nkem was her name, and though her lips spoke the truth, her words felt like poison to those who heard them. Her warnings, though meant to protect, were seen as seeds of fear. This is the story of the girl with the third eye. It was a bright sunny morning, and Kem sat outside her family's hut, perched on a low wooden stool. Her gaze was fixed on the dense forest in the distance. The air was heavy that day, the kind of quiet that blankets a place just before a storm. Her father, Chukwudi, a proud hunter, stood nearby, sharpening his machete. As Chukwudi sharpened his machete, Onkem pleaded, "Father, the forest is angry today. Please don't go hunting." Chukwudi quickly dismisses her advice. "What nonsense are you speaking, Nkem? The forest cannot be angry. It is a place for men, not for your foolish visions." "I saw it in my dream last night. A snake coiled and waiting. Father, please listen." But Chukwudi, a proud man known for his skills, laughed off his daughter's words. And so, with his brother Obina at his side, he entered the forest, leaving Ankem behind to whisper quiet prayers to the gods. The forest was alive that day, its secrets hidden in the rustle of leaves and the cries of unseen creatures. Chukwudi and Obina moved silently, their spears ready. But then Chukwudi froze. The cobra struck with lightning speed, its venom burning through Chukwudi's veins like fire. Obina's cries echoed through the forest as he carried his brother back to the village, but no healer could undo what the forest had already claimed. Back in the village, mourners gathered at Chukwudi's compound, and Kim stood apart, her head bowed, tears streaming down her face, but grief turned quickly to anger. Obina shouting angrily at Ankem, "This is your doing, Ankem. You cursed him with your evil tongue." Nkem's stepmother Ngozi added coldly, "A witch has no place in this family. You should have been cast out long ago." In Obodo, it was easier to blame than to believe. Nkem's warnings, though true, were seen as the cause of tragedy rather than its prevention, and so she carried the weight of their hatred in silence. Meanwhile, in another part of the village, Prince Ademola sat beneath the royal palm, his shoulders slumped. Beside him, his friend Emeka spoke animatedly, his voice filled with frustration. "Ademola, you cannot keep avoiding this. Marry Chiamaka and fulfill your duty." Ademola took a deep breath. "My heart is not with her, Emeka. I will not marry a woman I do not love." In the royal compound, duty outweighed desire, but Ademola, the heir to the throne, longed for something more, a connection, a spark. Little did he know, fate was weaving his path toward the village outcast. At the edge of Obodo stood the shrine of Priestess Olaido, a sacred space where villagers sought the wisdom of the gods. Onkem knelt before the priestess, her face illuminated by the flickering firelight. The air was thick with the scent of burning herbs and mystery. "The gods have spoken, Onkem. The forest's anger is not your doing, but you are its key. The voice of silence will guide you, but the path will not be easy," said the priestess, her voice calm and wise. How can I protect them when they see me as the enemy? Asked Nkem. In that moment, the priestess placed a firm hand on Nkem's shoulder, her voice filled with an ancient power that left no room for doubt. Truth does not need belief, child. It simply is. The forest will call again, and when it does, you must answer, instructed a priestess Oledo. Back in Obodo, strange events began to plague the villagers. Livestock disappeared from their pens. Children claimed they saw shadows moving in the night, whispering their names. The final straw came when a venomous snake was found coiled in the middle of the market square, its golden eyes glowing in the dim light. The villagers began to whisper, "It's her, and Kem has cursed us all." Fear spread like wildfire, and the whispers grew louder. They looked for someone to blame, and once again their eyes turned to Nkem. But the truth was far more terrifying than they could imagine. One evening, Nkem walked alone through the empty fields, her heart heavy with the weight of the village's hatred. The setting sun painted the horizon in deep orange hues. Ahead, a figure approached, a tall, broad-shouldered man. It was Prince Ademola. He looked at Nkem curiously. "You're the one they call a witch," Nkem answered bitterly, without looking at him. "And you're the prince who won't marry. We both carry burdens we didn't choose." Their meeting was unexpected, but their connection was instant. For the first time, Nkem felt seen, not as a curse, but as a person. And for Ademola, she was the spark he had been searching for, a light in the darkness of his duty-bound life. Meanwhile, the unrest in Obodo had reached the royal palace. King Amarachukwu, a man known for his wisdom, summoned Priestess Oledo to understand the growing chaos in his land. With concern, King Amarachukwu asked authoritatively, "What is happening to my people, priestess? Is this the work of the gods?" Priestess Oledo responds calmly but firmly, "The gods are not punishing you, your majesty, but the girl you call a witch holds the key to your salvation." The king's expression darkened, his mind racing with disbelief. How could the outcast, scorned by the very people she was meant to protect, hold the power to save them all? But Priestess Oledo's voice carried the weight of the gods. Her words were final. She prepared Nkem to face the forest. At the edge of the ancient forest, where the trees swayed as if in conversation, Nkem stood resolute. Behind her, the villagers gathered, their faces etched with fear and mistrust. The weight of their judgment bore down on her, yet she remained unbroken. But not all were against her. Beside her stood Prince Ademola. His eyes, sharp and focused, bore no trace of doubt. And Kim stepped into the dense forest, her heart pounding in rhythm with the distant drum beats of the village behind her. The air was cooler under the canopy of ancient trees, but the silence weighed heavily, suffocating her resolve. Behind her, Prince Ademola followed closely. His presence, steady and firm, contrasted with the murmurs of disapproval that echoed from the villages they left behind. The forest was alive, its secrets hidden in the rustle of leaves and the cries of unseen creatures. But Nkem didn't waver. She had walked this path in her visions many times before. Now, it was time to face the truth. "You're not going alone, Nkem. Whatever waits for you in there, I will face it with you," said Prince Ademola firmly. And Kim whispered softly, "The forest doesn't need you, Prince, but if you insist, stay close. It will test us both." The villagers, bound by fear, dared not follow. They could only watch as Nkem, their supposed curse, and the prince, their unexpected ally, disappeared into the shadows. The forest, alive and ancient, welcomed them with an eerie calm, its secrets buried deep within. With each step, Obodo's fate followed closely behind. The deeper they ventured into the forest, the stranger it became. The trees, once proud and tall, now seemed to lean inward, their gnarled branches stretching like skeletal fingers. Shadows moved where no light should have been, and a faint hissing sound echoed around them, its source unseen. The forest was not merely a place, it was a living, breathing entity, and it was watching them. Ademola glanced around nervously. This place, it feels alive, he said, because it is. The forest remembers everything, every step, every word, every scene, whispers on Kem. Suddenly a rustling sound cuts through the air. A shadow darts across their path. Ademola acted instinctively, drawing his machete with a sharp metallic sound. His blade glinted in the dim light, ready to strike. And Kem placed a calm hand on his arm. Do not strike unless it strikes first. Violence feeds the forest. Her words hung in the air, a warning not just to the prince, but to the unseen force that surrounded them. The forest had rules, and breaking them meant paying a price. Back in Obodo, fear gripped the village. The villagers gathered in the square, their anxiety growing with every passing moment. Obinna, driven by grief and anger, paced furiously before the crowd, his voice rising above the murmur. Obinna yelled, "What kind of king sends a witch into the forest to solve our problems? She is the problem." Ngozi added sharply, "If she doesn't return by nightfall, we should burn her hut and rid the village of her curse once and for all." Fear is a dangerous thing. It turns neighbors into enemies and whispers into shouts. In Obodo, fear was winning. The murmur of the crowd grows louder until a sudden tapping of a staff silences them. Priestess Olaedo steps forward. "Patience, my people. The gods are watching, and their judgment will not be rushed." Her voice, steady and resolute, carried over the crowd. The villagers fell silent, their fear momentarily replaced by uncertainty. But the storm brewing in the skies mirrored the unrest in their hearts. Meanwhile, in the heart of the forest, Nkem and Ademola reached a clearing. The ground was covered in fallen leaves, and at its center lay a circle of stones. Within the circle, a massive snake coiled, its golden eyes gleaming like fire. This was no ordinary creature. It was the embodiment of the forest's anger, its voice made flesh, and it was waiting for Nkem. A low, menacing hiss fills the air. The snake speaks. "Why do you come here, seer? To speak for those who would silence you." Nkem kneels slowly, her voice steady but tinged with fear. "I come to plead for my people, though they do not deserve it. Their ignorance has fed your wrath, but they are still your children." The snake's gaze turned to Ademola, who stood frozen, caught between the urge to fight and the call to bow. "And you, prince? Do you believe this seer's words?" Ademola hesitates, his voice uncertain but strong. "I believe in her. If that is not enough, then I have no answer for you." The snake uncoiled, its movement slow and deliberate, its golden eyes never leaving Nkem. Its voice grew louder, echoing through the clearing like thunder. "For the sins of your people, a price must be paid. Will you, seer, give yourself to the forest to save them?" Nkem's breath quickens, her heart clenches, but her voice is calm. "If that is what it takes, then yes, my life for theirs." Prince Ademola steps forward, his voice rising. He shouted, "No! You don't have to do this. There must be another way." But the forest did not bargain. It only demanded. Back in Obodo, a storm began to brew. The skies darkened, and a fierce wind swept through the village, scattering leaves and dust. The villagers, once united in their fear of Nkem, now turned their faces toward the forest, trembling. Obina, terrified by the storm, asked, "What is happening? Is this her doing?" Priestess Olado steps forward once again, her staff glowing faintly in the storm's light. She said firmly, "It is not Nkem's doing, but yours. The forest is deciding your fate, and it may not be merciful." The villagers, so quick to judge, now found themselves at the mercy of forces they couldn't understand. And as the storm raged on, their fear turned to desperation. In the tense forest, the snake circled and came, its golden eyes piercing through her resolve. Your sacrifice is accepted, but the forest sees your heart. You would give your life not for them, but because you long for peace from your burden. The snake's words cut deep, exposing a truth Anne Kim hadn't dared to admit to herself. She lowered her head, her breath catching in her chest. The snake continues, "The forest will take another instead. Choose wisely, seer." The forest had turned the test into a greater trial. Nkem now held the power to save herself, but at what cost? Nkem knelt frozen before the serpent, her mind racing. The weight of the decision pressed heavily on her. Ademola's voice broke through her thoughts. "Nkem, you do not have to bear this alone. If a sacrifice must be made, let it be me." And Kim shakes her head. "No, Ademola, you don't understand. The forest doesn't take sacrifices out of pity. It demands justice. This is my burden." The forest was silent, but its presence was overwhelming. It waited, watching as the two souls wrestled with their fate. As the forest loomed darker, Nkem's memories surfaced like whispers from the past. She saw her late mother, Ezine, standing by the river, her voice filled with warmth and warnings. "Nkem, the gods gave you this sight to protect, not to destroy. But protection comes with sacrifice, and sacrifice requires love. Only love can balance the scales." The vision struck and came with clarity. The answer wasn't in choosing who should pay the price. It was in showing the forest the depth of her love for her people, even if they despised her. She said firmly to the serpent, "I offer my life, not out of duty, but because I love my people. Let my death remind them of their faults and teach them to honor the balance." In that moment, the serpent hisses softly, its golden eyes narrowing. The forest trembled, and a low rumble echoed around them. Ademola stepped forward, raising his machete as if to shield Ankem. He defiantly shouted, "If the forest takes her, it will take me too. I will not let her go alone." The forest, ancient and wise, had heard the prince's declaration. It shifted, its power swelling, and a sudden silence fell upon them. The serpent reared up, its voice resonating like thunder. "Your love is rare, prince, and your sacrifice, seer, is true. The forest will spare your lives, but only if the village learns its lesson. This balance must not be disturbed again." And Cain's heart swelled with hope, but the serpent wasn't finished. "The debt, however, cannot go unpaid. The one who fuels discord among you will face the forest's judgment." The serpent concluded. Back in Obodo, the storm grew more violent. Trees bent under the wind's force, and huts shook as thunder roared. Villagers clung to one another, their fear palpable. Priestess Olaido stood firm in the center of the square, her staff raised high. The gods have spoken. Their wrath will not cease until you atone for your actions. Reflect on your hatred, your selfishness, and your greed. The priestess announced. The villagers, so quick to blame Nkem, now felt the weight of their guilt. Whispers of regret spread through the crowd, but one voice rose above the rest. Obina said angrily, "This is madness. The gods are using this witch to punish us all." The moment the words left his mouth, a bolt of lightning struck the ground near him, silencing the crowd. Obinna staggered back, his face pale with shock. As the storm raged on, Onkem and Ademola emerged from the forest, the serpent's hiss still echoing in their ears. The villagers turned to see them, their faces a mix of fear and relief. Nkem, once the outcast, now stood as their savior, but the forest had not forgotten the one who spread hatred among them. Obina's knees buckled as the wind swirled around him. A dark shadow appeared at his side. A smaller, ghostly version of the serpent speaks out. You, Obina, fueled the fire of discord. Your hatred disrupted the balance. You will carry the forest's burden. Obina's screams filled the square. As the shadow wrapped around him, he collapsed, trembling, his voice reduced to whispers of apology. The storm began to subside, the winds calming and the skies clearing. The villagers, shaken but unharmed, gathered around Ankem and Ademola. Priestess Oledo stepped forward, her voice carrying a new authority. Let this be a lesson to you all. The gods gave Nkem her sight not as a curse, but as a gift to protect us. Honor her, for she has saved you. Nkem looked around, her eyes meeting those of the villagers who once scorned her. Slowly, one by one, they knelt before her, their heads bowed in respect. For the first time, Nkem felt the weight of acceptance. The village had finally opened its eyes to the truth, but deep inside, she knew the forest's warning was not one to forget. As night fell, Nkem sat by the river, staring at her reflection in the water. Ademola joined her, his presence a quiet comfort. You've changed them, Nkem. You've changed me. Nkem smiles. The forest changed us all, but its balance is fragile. We must never forget that. The forest slept, but its memory lingered, and in Obodo life carried on, forever changed by the voice of silence. Weeks passed, and the village of Obodo began to heal. The once divided community now worked together, rebuilding what the storm had destroyed. And Kem walked through the village square, her head held high for the first time. The villagers greeted her with respect, their previous scorn replaced by gratitude. The forest had forgiven, but its lesson remained etched in the hearts of the people. No longer was Anne Kim the outcast. She was their guide, their protector, the one who had faced the forest's wrath and returned. And Kim stood outside her family's hut, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Her stepmother Ngozi approached hesitantly, her face filled with guilt. And Kim, I was wrong. I let my fear and jealousy blind me. Can you ever forgive me? And Kem looked at her for a long moment before nodding. The forest taught us all a lesson, stepmother. I forgive you, but we must never forget what we've learned. Inside the hut, Obina, weakened but alive, sat beside his brother Chukwudi's grave, murmuring prayers for forgiveness. Nkem joined him, placing a hand on his shoulder. Uncle, your anger almost consumed us all. Let us move forward with love, not fear. Obina nodded. You have more strength than I ever gave you credit for, Nkem. Thank you for saving us. The king called for a grand feast in the village square to celebrate the restoration of peace. The villagers gathered, their spirits lifted as they shared food, music, and laughter. Prince Ademola stood beside Nkem, his admiration evident. Nkem, you've given this village hope. Perhaps now you can allow yourself some happiness. Nkem smiles and answers, happiness doesn't come easily for someone like me, but perhaps I'll try. The prince, whose heart had long searched for connection, found it in the courage and wisdom of the seer, and as the feast continued, the bond between them grew stronger, a symbol of unity for the village. At the edge of the forest, Nkem knelt one last time, placing a small offering of fruits and flowers beneath the towering trees. The air was still, the forest calm, and Nkem whispers, thank you for your mercy and your lessons. We will honor the balance. The forest watched silently, its anger soothed. It had taken much from the village, but it had also given them something precious, the understanding that harmony is not found in power or pride, but in love, respect, and unity. The tale of Obodo and the voice of silence teaches us many things. That fear breeds hatred, and hatred blinds us to the truth. That the greatest strength is found not in defiance, but in humility. And that even the smallest voice, if it speaks the truth, can change the world. And Kim's journey was not just her own, it was a path for the entire village to follow. In learning to listen to her, they found the wisdom to listen to themselves, to each other, and to the balance of the world around them. And so, the story of Nkem and Obodo comes to a close, not with an ending, but with a beginning of understanding, of unity, and of peace. For in the voice of silence, they found the strength to rebuild and the courage to thrive. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Until we meet again, remember the truth, though quiet, is never weak. It only waits for the right heart to hear it.